Good afternoon. Welcome to PCAP's Prairie's Got the Goods Week. My name is Caitlin Rose, and I am the Stewardship Coordinator with Saskatchewan Prairie Conservation Action Plan, or PCAP. This afternoon, Monica Hadarits from the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef will be talking about beef and biodiversity, how CRSB is driving advancement in beef sustainability. Check out other events going on for our Prairie's Got the Goods Week. Tomorrow at 3 p.m, join us for a webinar about the importance of native grasslands to songbirds by Sarah Ludlow from the Nature Conservancy of Canada. On March 20th at noon, Colleen Couvalier from LSRCD will be presenting about Alice in the Little Saskatchewan River Conservation District. To register for these webinars or to see the week schedule, please visit the PCAP website, www.pcap-sk.org. I'd like to take a moment to note that Prairie's Got the Goods Week is presented by Crescent Point Energy, Wildlife Habitat Canada, and SAS Power, as well as Environment and Climate Change Canada. In-kind support for today's webinar has been given by the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. A reminder to all of our listeners out there, if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type it into the question section of the webinar dashboard at any time during the presentation, and we will answer questions toward the end of the webinar. I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Monica Hadarits. Monica is the Executive Director of the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. In this role, Monica leads the strategic direction and management of the organization, as well as overseeing funding opportunities and stakeholder relations. Monica began with the CRSB in 2015 as a community engagement manager, and in 2017 took on the role of certification and programs manager, where she oversaw the development of the sustainability standards and certification aspects of the Certified Sustainable Beef Framework. She was appointed Executive Director in December 2018. Monica received her undergraduate and master's degrees from the University of Guelph and has focused her career and research on sustainable natural resource use and climate variability in agriculture. Monica has family farm roots in Saskatchewan. She has experience working in rural communities across Canada and international agriculture research experience in South America. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Monica.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you a little bit more about the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef today. So the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef was established in 2014. We are a multi-stakeholder collaborative organization focused on advancing sustainability efforts in the Canadian beef industry. Our mission is up on the screen there for you. It's really to facilitate the framework for the Canadian beef industry to be a leader in continual improvement and sustainability of the entire beef value chain, and we're going to accomplish that through science, multi-stakeholder engagement, communications, and collaboration. There's already a huge amount of work and initiatives underway that contribute to continual improvement, and our role really is to serve as a facilitator, develop any frameworks, and bring organizations together to have constructive conversations about beef sustainability, not to reinvent the wheel or to duplicate efforts. So sustainability is a term that's used in many different ways in many different sectors. So after we were formed in 2014, really the next step was having our membership define sustainable beef, which was really critical before we started diving into all of the work that we've been doing over the last number of years. So the definition of sustainable beef that we use is on your screen there as well. It's again, very conceptual and high level, so we drill that down into the 5 key principles, which are natural resources, people in the community, animal health and welfare, food, and efficiency and innovation. And we adopted the definition and the 5 principles from the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, a similar organization that operates at the global level. One thing that we've done differently in Canada from the Global Roundtable is that we've included that economic viability piece that underpins all those 5 principles. We heard really loud and clear from our membership that this needed to be called out explicitly when we work on sustainable beef in Canada, because you can't have true sustainability without that economic viability piece. So just to place the work of the CRSB, the work that we do at the CRSB in the global context, we were the second roundtable that was formed globally behind Brazil. There are now 11 other roundtables currently operating, and more are being formed year after year. So the beef sustainability conversation is global. There is a lot of alignment happening, again, through the definition and the 5 principles. And there's alignment through information sharing, lessons learned exchanged, and a lot of momentum of movement. So the 11 current regional roundtables that are operating right now are on your screen there, and they span the globe. So really the strength of the CRSB is in our multi-stakeholder membership. It spans the entire beef value chain and beyond. On the screen, you'll see our voting members, which include beef producer organizations, processors, environmental and non-governmental organizations or NGOs, animal care groups, retail and food service companies, agriculture and food business, and academic institutes. We also have observing members, which include governments, researchers, and individual producers. So collaboration and perspective from all of these areas are represented on the CRSB's council, our governance group, all of our committees, and across all of the areas of our work, essentially. We currently have over 110 members and observers, and that just really shows the commitment and the interest in beef sustainability in Canada. This number continues to grow year after year. So after we had our definition and our 5 principles and we had membership at the table, then came the discussion on what we wanted to work on together. So as I noted on the previous slide, we have a wide range of members with a wide range of interests. So we have 3 core areas that we work on to meet everyone's needs. We have our sustainability benchmarking pillar, our certification framework, and our sustainability projects pillar. And I'll walk through each of those in a little bit more detail. So our first pillar of work is our sustainability benchmarking. In 2016, we launched our National Beef Sustainability Assessment. It's a comprehensive study that assessed the social, economic, and environmental performance of the Canadian beef industry from farm all the way through to fork. It gave us a common set of key performance indicators and measures to communicate nationally and abroad. And it also gave us a baseline to measure and track the industry's performance over time. So the assessment really showed a number of areas where the Canadian beef industry is performing well, and also helped us to identify opportunities for improvement. After we completed that study, our members worked together and completed a sustainability strategy with goals and action items to continually improve this performance over time. So we'll be releasing an interim report in 2020, and the next assessment we are going to release in 2023 to see how the industry's moved forward over the last 7 years. So there's a lot of information in that assessment, and I'm going to highlight just a few key findings for the webinar, but I would encourage you to visit www.crsb.ca to view the full summary report. And you can also download the full reports with all the technical details and the methodologies there as well. So they're all publicly accessible on our website. So I want to highlight the land use key performance indicator that came out of that assessment. So what we found was that beef cattle production uses approximately 52.2 million acres of the Canadian agricultural land base, the majority of which are grasslands. Specifically, if we break down that pasture number on the top right-hand side there, 32 million acres are natural pasture and 12 million acres are tame or seeded. So now that we have that global number, or that number for the entire industry in Canada, we also assess biodiversity within the agricultural landscape. So we found that land use for beef production represents 33% of the agricultural land, and but within that 33%, that accounts for 68% of the wildlife habitat, really demonstrating the link and the important link between beef production and wildlife habitat. Another indicator that we included in that assessment was carbon storage. So what we found was that beef cattle production helps preserve approximately 1.5 billion tons of carbon, primarily in those grassland ecosystems. So grasslands, again, are not only important for wildlife habitat, but for carbon storage as well. The assessment also quantified the greenhouse gas contribution of Canadian beef. And what we found is that we have one of the lowest greenhouse gas footprints in the world at 11.4 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalents per kilogram of live weight. So now we have these Canadian numbers that we can talk about the greenhouse gas contribution with some scientific evidence backing it. And the last number I wanted to leave you with is the economic viability one. I think this number really provides context when we're thinking of asking producers to do more, and is really a reality check for myself and also the membership at the CRSB. So the average long-term margins for a 200 head cow herd provides an annual income of $17,559. And that means that between 74 and 85% of the cow-calf sector relies on an off-farm income. So that's a little bit of a high-level overview of some of the results that came out of the study. It really provided some national numbers on key social and economic and environmental indicators that we need when we communicate with stakeholders and the public about the industry's performance. There are a lot of global numbers floating around, and so this study really provides Canadian-specific numbers that Canadian stakeholders can speak to. And these are the 10 goals that the membership has agreed to collectively work on to advance the industry's sustainability performance. The strategy is really our roadmap. We obviously don't work in all of these areas. There's a lot of work that's already ongoing, and this spans, environmental, social, and economic goals. But that really, it has enabled us to make partnerships and collaborations with new organizations to help advance our goals. So one example of that is we've reached out to the National Zero Waste Council as they're doing a lot of work on food loss and waste, and that food loss and waste from secondary processing all the way through to consumption really does affect the industry's sustainability. So it's provided an entry point for us to reach out to organizations that are working in this space that help continually advance the performance of the Canadian beef industry. So the Certified Sustainable Beef Framework is the second pillar of the CRSB's work, and really where we've been focusing our efforts for the last 2.5 years. We have developed in Canada the first outcome-based certification program for beef sustainability in the world. We're really excited and really proud of that in Canada. The Certified Sustainable Beef Framework is a voluntary certification program, and it's just one tool in a producer's toolbox to demonstrate responsible practices. The mission of the framework is to advance and recognize beef sustainability through a certification, and its objectives are threefold. The first is to recognize and certify producers and processors for their sustainable practices. The second is to enable retail and food service companies to source beef from those certified operations, and also enable them to meet their sustainable sourcing commitments, because that's becoming increasingly popular. And the third is to provide credible assurances for consumers and the public. So for supply chains, for producers and processors that are certified, and for retail and food service companies who want to use the logo, provide credible communication and messaging that they can use in their marketing materials. Just wanted to give a little bit of background on how the framework was developed. It was, like I mentioned, a 2.5 year project. It was really guided by national and international best practices. So we did follow the international social and environmental accreditation and labeling codes of good practice in the framework's development. We also had 3 multi-stakeholder committees working on different aspects. So we had the indicator committee working on our standards, which I'll talk about in a little bit, a verification committee working on our assurance protocols and our chain of custody requirements, and our communications and marketing committee developed our communications claims and labeling guide. So in total, there are about 70 people working with all different perspectives across the entire beef value chain and beyond. That did a very heavy lift to get this framework completed in a short time, in 2.5 years. We went through a number of public and membership feedback processes. We did 4 rounds of public consultations on our standards. We received over 250 comments, and we reviewed each one and provided a response to each one. And we also got over 100 comments through formal membership consultations as well. So we got a lot of feedback. We did a lot of consultations over the 2.5-year process. And then we also did a lot of field testing, of course, when our committees were developing all the different aspects of the framework. Something that looks really good in the boardroom, you really need to test that in the field to see if it makes sense. So McDonald's had a pilot project, and then we also did some test audits after that. So we did some field testing with over 200 producers just to make sure that what we were developing in the boardroom made sense on the ground. And then lastly, we also did some consumer research, especially in the context of helping us to pick the logo and the claims. We surveyed just over 500 Canadians through an online survey, and that really helped us narrow down the claims, the messaging that they were, more trusting of, and also the logos that were most appealing to them. So these are the key components of the framework. There are 4 key components, and they're all publicly available again on our website. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more, please visit our website to check it out, www.crsb.ca. The first component of the framework is our standards, and they're really the foundation of the certification framework. They're documents that contain the outcome-based indicators that would be audited on a beef operation or in a primary processing facility in a voluntary certification audit. They're organized around 5 principles that I mentioned earlier. And I think one thing I'd just like to note here is that we took an outcome-based approach for the framework, for the standards. So we don't prescribe what producers and processors need to do to become certified. Some sustainability standards do. That's not the approach that we took. We identified the outcome that needs to be achieved, and producers and processors have the freedom to innovate and to the flexibility and the freedom to innovate to achieve the outcomes that were identified. The second component of the framework is our assurance protocols. That's a document that essentially outlines the certification process. So it includes things like the audit cycle, auditor competence, how auditors need to be trained, what requirements certification bodies need to have in order to deliver audits for the CRSB. So those are all contained within the assurance protocols document. The third area, or the third component, is our chain of custody requirements. This is a document that outlines the requirements for tracking cattle and then beef through the supply chain. And then these requirements are linked to the allowable claims that can be used by supply chain members, and really are linked to number 4. 3 and 4 are really, really critically linked. So number 4 is our sustainability claims. Our claims guide provides guidance. So we have a guide that provides information and guidance on how a certified producer, a certified processor, and a retail or food service company that's sourcing through these certified operations can communicate about the framework. So within the Sustainable Beef Production Standard, this is applicable to beef production operations. And this is an excerpt from the Sustainable Beef Production Standard from the natural resources perspective. So there are indicators under people and community, animal health and welfare, food and efficiency and innovation, but I just pulled out the natural resources. So I thought that would be the most interest to the crew here. So these are the 6 outcome-based indicators in the natural resources section of the Sustainable Beef Production Standard. So they cover, for example, the first covers watershed health, the second covers soil health, and then we cover grazing management and habitat conservation and wildlife conflict. So a producer would be asked questions about these 6 topics and be asked to demonstrate how they are meeting these indicators if they were to make the business decision to participate in a voluntary certification audit. And again, this is all available on our website if you want to have a deeper dive into it. And so I'm just going to walk through. So I talked about the key components of the framework, and I think for me, I'm more of a process thinker. So just wanted to walk through one example of a supply chain and the pieces that need to fall into place to be able to use the CRSB's certification logo. So the cow-calf, backgrounding, and feedlot operations would need to be certified to the Sustainable Beef Production Standard. The primary processor needs to be certified to the Sustainable Beef Processing Standard. And then also there needs to be a chain of custody check there as well, a chain of custody audit. And then depending on the supply chain and depending on the model that's used within the supply chain and what claim the end user, the retailer, food service company wants to make, there would need to be chain of custody audits to our chain of custody requirements throughout. And all of that would need to be in place in order to enable a consumer-facing claim. So the cattle must move through certified operations all the way through to and including the primary processor. And then the beef needs to be tracked through the supply chain via a chain of custody audit. So we currently have one food service company using the certification logo in the marketplace, which we're thrilled about, and are anticipating more in the future. Many of you may be familiar with the Cargill Beef Sustainability Acceleration Pilot. So that's an example of one supply chain that's taken the framework that was developed by the CRSB and are applying it into their business. So really the framework has created a market mechanism for beef sustainability and recognition for that, for those who choose to participate and utilize it. So the third pillar of work for the CRSB is our sustainability projects pillar. We're currently working on fleshing this out a bit more because we focused in 2016 on our National Beef Sustainability Assessment, and then for the last couple of years on our certification framework, and they're now turning our attention to the sustainability projects pillar. And so really what we're doing here is advancing, developing this pillar a little bit further. And I'll talk through currently what we're doing now and then what our plans are this coming year as well, which we're excited about. So we currently have one collaborative project in the grassland natural region of Alberta that has been funded by Environment and Climate Change Canada. And the focus of this project is on delivering baseline environmental inventories. To date, they've done 128,000 acres. So it's really the project's a collaboration between some producer organizations, so the Canadian Cattlemen's Association and Alberta Beef Producers, with CRSB playing more of a project management role, and environmental non-governmental organizations, Multi-SAR and Cows and Fish, where the environmental NGOs go out and conduct rangeland and riparian health assessments on beef operations, and together the producer and the NGOs develop some voluntary habitat management strategies, and there's some funding available to producers to implement projects that they select to enhance habitat for species at risk. So that's one of the current projects that we have at the CRSB. We also have an annual consumer research project where we check in with a representative sample of Canadian consumers on a variety of different topics. So last year, we checked in with the public, I mentioned earlier. We wanted feedback on the certification logo, and ask them about their general awareness of the CRSB. So understanding, how familiar is the public with the CRSB and the work that we do. And one of the things that we were really excited to learn was that 8% of Canadians are familiar with the organization. So that's a high number for a relatively young organization, something we were really excited about, and a good benchmark as we do annual consumer research to see how that number changes over time. The other item that came out of that consumer perceptions of beef sustainability research project that we did was that 68% of Canadians indicated that they would trust a sustainability certification for beef. So again, we're learning. That's a baseline, and hopefully we can do a check-in this year to see if that's numbers change, especially with one food service company using the certification mark in the marketplace. And this year we're going to do, again, some follow-up consumer research, and the results are made available to our members. So this is what we have kind of in the pipeline right now. We know that there's a lot of projects happening across the country that align with the goals of our sustainability strategy that I highlighted a little bit earlier. There's a lot of work that's ongoing. And so what we're going to do this year, we checked in with our members, and we heard back that this would be a valuable tool. So we're developing a web-based map and a projects inventory to showcase the work that's already happening and help organizations to identify any gaps that they can fill. So developing a tool that's on our website that people can search and look for projects across Canada, and A, to communicate the work, but B, to be able to help facilitate collaboration potentially across projects if there is interest across a number of jurisdictions, if that's of interest. And then also to help folks identify gaps that they can fill. So we do have an annual survey that we send out to collect information on projects. If you or anybody you know are doing projects on the ground that foster continuous improvement, we encourage you to complete the survey that's going out later this spring. You don't have to be a member to participate, and you can follow us on Twitter to stay in the loop on that. And we also have a newsletter. So if you'd like to stay in the loop on the work of the CRSB, visit our website, follow us on Twitter, and you can sign up for our newsletter on our website as well. So that's an overview. I just gave you an overview of the CRSB's work. We benchmark and track sustainability performance nationally. We have a certification framework for supply chains that are interested in that market mechanism. Not all of our members are interested in going down that route. We all have a wide array of members sitting at the table, but we do have that option if supply chains choose. And then we also have those internal projects that I mentioned, the consumer research and the environmental inventory project, the SARPEL project, Species at Risk on Agricultural Landscapes. And we're also going to start gathering information on existing projects and help play more of a communication facilitation role there. So now I just really want to drill down on the beef and biodiversity conversation specifically. It was weaved into the previous slides a little bit. Hopefully that was explicit, but I just want to leave you with a few thoughts before I wrap up today. We know that much of Canada's grazing land is, of course, grassland. We know that temperate grasslands are an endangered ecosystem and are a high priority conservation need globally. And it's widely recognized within the beef community, but also now, which is really exciting, increasingly by the environmental NGO community, that cattle keep those grasslands and their biodiversity intact. And so cattle are a critical component of grassland conservation. And so the now what is, how can we disseminate the work, amplify the communications? How do we best show the environmental benefits of beef production? Well, from our perspective, collaboration is the key. We don't have all the answers, but really our goal is to have multiple tools through our 3 pillars of work, gather the science, build the collaborations, be transparent and commit to continual improvement, and communicate it in a way that builds trust within supply chains, across our stakeholders, and with the public. So really, we need to be working together on that. And that's it for me. I just want to thank you so much for having me here today. And I think, Caitlin, I can hand it over to you and take any questions if there are any.
Sure. Thank you so much for the awesome presentation. I know I was taking notes like mad, writing down all those numbers and statistics and everything. So thank you so much. To all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you have any questions for Monica, please feel free to type it into the question section of the webinar dashboard. And Monica, I was wondering, you had mentioned that you have a newsletter that you can sign up for through the website. Is that correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And is that just for members, or can anybody who's interested in sustainable beef sign up for the newsletter?
It's open to everybody, so it's public. And if you're interested, if you want to, I can send you the link, Caitlin, if you want to distribute it to the folks on that were registered, or you can just visit our website, www.crsb.ca, and on the right-hand side on the main page, there should be a sign up now for our website. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That's awesome. We have a couple questions coming in. A listener named Mike says, I may have missed this earlier on in the presentation, but when did the CRSB effectively become active in Canada?
So in 2014, we were officially formed.
Okay, so a very new organization then in the grand scheme of things.
Mm-hmm.
And a listener named Jeff would like to know, what kind of uptake are you experiencing among producers and feedlots?
We're having pretty good uptake. We recognized Verified Beef Production Plus as one of our certification bodies last August. And so all the folks that were signed up for VBP Plus were eligible for the CRSB certification as well. So that really helped uptake, increase quite rapidly, because we were able to recognize all of those producers. And we also have Where Food Comes From as another certification body if folks want some choice. And so we have pretty good uptake. Right now, we know that there's more demand than supply, and that's coming from Cargill and some of the announcements that they've been making in the press. And we know that in the first quarter of their pilot, 3.7 million pounds of beef qualified for a CRSB claim. So again, that's pretty good for a framework that has been around for just over a year.
Yes, wow. That looks like all the questions that we have right now. But I just wanted to let our listeners know that we will have a presentation on April 2nd by the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. And so that'll be taking place April 2nd at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So you can sign up through the PCAP website. And it doesn't look like we have any more questions. So thank you so much, Monica. This was really interesting, and I'm really glad that there's somebody that's doing the work that you're doing. So I know I'll be spreading the word on some of your fact sheets and joining your e-newsletter.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you. And again, if anybody has any questions, they can feel free to visit our website, or they can feel free to contact me as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. This was a very informative presentation, and our listeners are kind of writing into that. It's very informative and very interesting. So thank you, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.